In October of 1917, a fishing crew working the coast south of Cherbourg spotted something wrong on the rocks at Rosal Point. A ship, grounded, tilted, but intact, sitting exactly where no ship should be able to sit without a crew fighting to keep it off the reef. When they climbed aboard, they didn't find wreckage. They found breakfast. A table was laid below deck. Plates set out for a meal that never got eaten. The stove was still lit. The sails showed only minor disarray, like someone had let go of the ropes mid-task. And across the entire ship, no captain, no crew, no lifeboat missing to explain where they'd gone. 6 men had vanished from a ship that never sank. This is the story of the Zabrina, a ship that survived a war that killed millions and lost every single man aboard her, without firing a shot, sinking an inch, or leaving behind a single body. More than a century later, nobody has ever explained where they went. The Zabrina wasn't built for mystery. She was an old wooden schooner decades into a long, unremarkable career of hauling coal back and forth across the English Channel, the kind of ship nobody looks twice at in a harbour. She'd started out with grander ambitions once meant for long ocean crossings, but that plan hadn't lasted. By 1917, she was just a working ship doing working ship things, port to port, cargo to cargo. That September, under the command of Captain Archibald Martin, she loaded a hold full of coal at Falmouth on the Cornish coast, bound for a small port on the other side of the Channel in France. It should have been routine. Martin had made crossings like this more times than he could count. His crew was small, 5 men under him, 6 souls total, a normal size for a ship her age doing a short coal run. But 1917 wasn't a normal year to be crossing that water. The first attempt to leave port didn't even get off the ground. Bad weather forced Martin to turn back just days before. When the Zabrina finally set out again in mid-October, she was heading into a channel that had more to worry about than storms. German U-boats were moving through those waters constantly that autumn, hunting exactly the kind of vessel the Zabrina was, slow, unarmed, and loaded with cargo worth sinking. Nobody aboard had any reason to think this crossing would be different from the hundreds before it. It was coal, a short hop, and 6 men who knew this stretch of water better than most. She cleared Falmouth and disappeared into the Channel. 2 days later, she reappeared, but not the way anyone expected. The Zabrina turned up aground at Rosal Point, just south of Cherbourg on the French coast, not sunk, not burned, not broken apart. She'd run onto the rocks and stopped there, held together by a flat-bottomed hull design that on any other vessel might have let her break apart entirely. Instead, she simply sat. When French Coast Guards climbed aboard, the first thing they noticed was what wasn't wrong. The rigging showed some disarrangement, a few lines loose, sails not properly secured, but nothing consistent with a storm, a collision, or an attack. No scorch marks, no shell damage, no blood. Below deck, they found the galley exactly as it might have looked moments before a meal. A table set, a stove still holding heat. Some accounts describe embers still glowing in the firebox, meaning it hadn't been out for long. Whoever had been about to eat that meal had gotten up and never come back to finish it. In the captain's cabin, they found the ship's log. The final entry was dated the day the Zabrina left Falmouth, 2 days before she was found. Nothing had been written since. No note of trouble, no distress, no final entry scrawled in a hurry. Whatever happened, it happened without anyone reaching for the log to record it. And then the detail that turns this from an odd accident into a genuine mystery. By most accounts, the ship's boat wasn't accounted for, as missing in a way that explained an orderly evacuation. There was no clear sign the crew had deliberately launched it and rowed to safety. No wreckage. No bodies washed ashore, then or ever. 6 men, a captain and 5 crew, had left Falmouth on a working ship and simply ceased to exist somewhere in a stretch of water barely wide enough to lose a fishing boat, let alone 6 grown men. Search efforts along the coast turned up nothing. No bodies, no debris, no lifeboat found drifting or wrecked on a nearby beach. In the middle of a war that was killing men by the hundreds of thousands just across the water, 6 sailors from an ordinary coal ship had vanished so completely that not even their deaths could be confirmed. And the question remained, where did the 6 men go? Here's what makes the Zabrina harder to explain than most missing crew stories. There was no time for anything elaborate to happen. Falmouth to the French coast was, at most, a 2-day sail. Somewhere inside that window, probably far less than the full 2 days, the entire crew disappeared, and whatever caused it left no mark on the ship itself. That short window rules out a lot of the explanations that get thrown at other ghost ships. This wasn't a months-long voyage, with time for disease to spread unnoticed, or supplies to run out, or tensions to boil into mutiny over weeks at sea. Whatever took the crew of the Zabrina and took them fast, took them completely, and left the ship itself almost untouched. That's the detail that keeps investigators from writing this off as a simple case of a ship running aground after her crew was lost overboard one by one. A crew that vanishes gradually doesn't leave a stove still burning and a table still set. Something interrupted this crew all at once, mid-task, mid-meal. And whatever it was, it didn't leave anyone behind to explain it. The leading theory, and the one most consistently repeated since 1917, involves a German U-boat. The North Atlantic and English Channel were thick with them that autumn, and a merchant ship carrying coal was a legitimate wartime target. Under this theory, a U-boat surfaced alongside the Zabrina, and its crew boarded her. A fairly standard practice at the time, since U-boat captains often preferred to inspect a ship's cargo and papers, or force a crew off before sinking a vessel with limited torpedoes. If that's what happened, the Zabrina's crew would have been ordered off their own ship, taken prisoner, or forced into a lifeboat before the U-boat either scuttled the Zabrina or simply left her adrift, assuming she'd sink on her own. Her flat-bottomed hull, and a stroke of luck with the currents, would explain how she survived long enough to wash up intact at Rosal Point instead of going down in open water. It's a theory that explains a lot, but it has a serious hole in it. Taking prisoners was unusual for U-boat commanders on a short coastal run. More often, ships were simply sunk, sometimes with a warning, sometimes without. And if the crew had been taken prisoner, that meant 6 men in German custody. The kind of thing that tends to leave a paper trail in prisoner of war records, in ship logs, in German naval reports. After the war, when researchers went looking for that paper trail, they found nothing. No German record of an attack on the Zabrina, no mention of her in U-boat captains' logs, which were generally kept in meticulous detail. No record of 6 British prisoners matching her crew. The Germans, when later asked, appeared to be just as mystified by the Zabrina's fate as the Allies were. A more elaborate version of the story claims the Zabrina had actually survived earlier torpedo attacks, her shallow, flat bottom letting torpedoes pass harmlessly beneath her. And some retellings go further, claiming she'd secretly been converted into a Q ship, a disguised warship, armed and manned by a much larger crew than her paperwork admitted to, meant to lure U-boats into range before opening fire. It's a dramatic image, but it's also where the story starts to drift from documented fact into embellishment. There's no reliable record confirming the Zabrina was ever armed, or that she carried anything more than her standard 6-man crew on that final voyage. Here's the uncomfortable context that shaped how this case was handled. In October of 1917, 6 missing sailors were not a priority. The war was in its 3rd year. Men were dying by the tens of thousands on the Western Front. U-boats were sinking merchant ships across the Atlantic almost daily, and a grounded coal schooner with a vanished crew, however strange, simply didn't have the resources or urgency behind it that a mystery like this might get today. The Zabrina herself was towed into Cherbourg, repaired, and, remarkably, put back into service. A ship that had just lost her entire crew under unexplained circumstances went back to hauling cargo. Because in the middle of a world war, a working vessel was too valuable to leave idle out of respect for a mystery. She kept working for decades after the war ended, passing through more owners, before eventually ending her career the least dramatic way possible, moored permanently and converted into a houseboat. The ship that had once made headlines as an unsolved wartime mystery spent her final years as somebody's quiet home on the water. In 1953, 36 years after Rosal Point, the Zabrina caught fire and was destroyed at her moorings in Portsmouth. Whatever physical evidence might have still existed aboard her, any trace of what happened on that crossing in 1917 burned with her. No formal investigation was ever reopened, no later discovery, no deathbed confession, no wreckage from a U-boat ever surfaced to close the case. The most detailed inquiry the Zabrina ever received happened in the days right after she washed ashore. And even then, wartime pressure meant nobody had the time to do more than note the mystery and move on. What makes the Zabrina different from most ghost ship stories isn't the scale of it. Nobody claims hundreds died. There's no sunken treasure, no monster in the water. It's the smallness of it. 6 men, a 2-day crossing, a stove still warm, a table set for a meal that never got eaten. That's what makes it hard to look away from. Big tragedies get explained, eventually, because enough people spend enough time looking. A small one, in the middle of a war that had bigger tragedies happening every single day, just gets logged, noted, and left behind. The ship repaired and put back to work within weeks, as if 6 missing men were an inconvenience to route around rather than a mystery to solve. If it was a U-boat, the men who could confirm it took the answer down with their own vessel or into a POW record that was never filed, or simply chose never to speak of it. If it wasn't a U-boat, if something else entirely happened in that gap between Falmouth and Rosal Point, then whatever it was left no trace at all on a ship that survived completely intact. More than 100 years later, the coastline south of Cherbourg looks the same as it did that October morning. The rocks are still there. The tide still comes in twice a day, exactly as it did when a fishing crew first spotted something wrong sitting on the water. Everything about that morning has been explainable, documented, and understood. The ship, the cargo, the captain's name, the exact date she left port. Everything except the 6 men who were supposed to be standing on her deck when she ran aground and weren't.